So one of my goals in Battletech is to become the most feared Locust pilot in the inner sphere. So often we get this kind of crazy idea, or we want to package together a lance, or maybe there's a certain type of mech a strategy that we enjoy playing. And in this podcast, I want to talk about and illustrate a little bit of this concept of building a checklist to make units work in a game. Now, this is Battletech specific, but certainly it also applies to other wargaming systems that I enjoy. So when I say a Locust, we talk about this idea, the narrative of Battletech, when you inherit a mech. If you get a Warhammer, you get a Marauder, you get a Battlemaster, you get an Atlas, an Awesome, basically a heavy or an assault mech, you're pretty much set. You're the elite of the elite. You inherit a medium mech, okay, you're going to be called on to be put out there a lot in the front lines, and you're going to have to engage a lot, but things could be worse. Light mechs, it depends on where you are, right? This idea of the tonnage spectrum, where you have some of the higher end, heavier light mechs, that like the Jenner, where that's not that bad. I mean, Jenner's almost, with the speed, firepower, and capacity of it, almost like a medium mech, a light medium. But when you're on that low spectrum there, it's almost like, could I have inherited a heavy tank instead, or some other support vehicle on there? So the Locust, the Stinger, the Wasp, the Bug mechs on there. I'm going to put the Cicada outside of that for a minute, because Cicada is kind of an interesting, I was going to say an interesting beast, but an interesting bug in that. These light mechs, you're kind of recon duty. When we look at them on the tabletop tactics for Battletech, it's almost like for the battle value. Now, I know vehicles versus mechs. Vehicles are cheaper, but you have motive damage issues and range and potentially movement issues on there. That's why the lower battle value sets that off. You can't make physical attacks like punching and kicking. And certainly a mech has more mobility with jump capabilities and other aspects there. But when we get to the really low light mechs, it's almost like, give me a medium or a heavy hover vehicle on there. Give me some VTOLs to compare to match, say, the Locust and other mechs. So in that acknowledgement, we really need to look and say the role on the tabletop is recon, is spotting, is maybe working into your opponent's deployment zone and kind of exploiting something really quick, or maybe in the case of the Locust and the Stinger with the machine guns, maybe to quickly engage infantry, maybe running to build up maximum speed to kind of have that modifier. And that's what's kind of ironic, where the Locust and the Stinger as a mech, I mean, think about that. Mech, machine versus man. It's still pretty impressive tech. Sending that up against infantry, you almost don't want to do that as a light mech pilot, because you have the machine guns on there, and the narrative put it at that perspective, dealing with infantry and light vehicles. And you'll certainly shred them. But an infantry platoon dug in, motivated, and ready, hostile and agile and mobile and ready, they could put the serious hurt on a light mech. So I'm kind of cautious to engage there. So a lot of different roles, certainly a support role. But we want to attack. We want to really push that on there. So let's look at a couple of ideas and some ways to push that out and utilize the tech of the Locust, the weaknesses. So the idea with this, we look at and analyze the mech. Any of the advantages, we're going to press and push forward like crazy, or as best we can. Any of the deficiencies, the question is, can we close those deficiencies? We build that list. Can we patch those holes on there, either through variants, tactics, or other support elements? Or can we keep our opponent busy enough, turn to turn on the table, where they realize, hey, this is a way I'm going to exploit this mech or exploit this list, but they're so busy doing other things all over the place, they can't do that. That's kind of the internal checklist. Stock mech versus variants. Now, Battletech's interesting because you've got a lot of interesting variants. Some of them correct deficiencies on the original mech. Others take things in a completely unexpected direction, like mounting an AC-20 on an urban mech. And some, in my opinion, really change the mech to something that it was never intended, or almost like a different mech. I mean, some of the really customized variants that are out there, as you kind of move down the alphabet more and more, it's almost like, let's just rename this and call this another mech. So for the most part, I personally play stock mechs with very few variants. And I enjoy the stock mechs, but I feel like with the Locust, to get the most out of it tactically, if we're going to use this aggressively, we need to go with the variant. I believe, you guys will correct me, I'm going off the memory here, I should know this, pardons asked for, I think it's the 5L. This is the variant that replaces the machine guns with 2 SRM-2 missile launchers. That alone, dynamically, it's almost like, why didn't they ship this with it in the first place? Well, it ups the battle value a little bit. It's a little bit more expensive in terms of C-bills, but now it puts the speed, it utilizes the speed of the Locust, it gives it a little bit more range versus the machine guns, and gives it a lot more bite in terms of being able to engage, potentially, depending on how you roll, 2 different spreads with the missiles and the medium laser. We're not going to be engaging any infantry, but maybe we were never really doing that in the first place. So the idea behind the Locust tactically, that's going to give it a little bit of a bite, pun intended, bug bite on there. Now we need to make this decision. A lot of wargamers will call this spam. A lot of wargamers utilize spam, and we're going to be feasting on some spam. We're basically going to build a swarm of Locusts on here. Now, from the competitive perspective of wargaming, what a lot of people will do is they'll look at a unit that's really good in the rule set, and because of the rule set, maybe the gaming company like Games Workshop is trying to push specific models, a new release for an edition, so they make the rules so amazing you'd be crazy not to take that unit. Thankfully, Battletech is more or less immune from that because the rules have been solid since its inception. I mean, Total Warfare, tongue twister, has a lot of different things out there, and some pieces get a little clunky here and there, but the rules are kind of solid. Second, what we'll see is with every edition of a wargame or a new release, the way the rules come together, certain units tend to favor other aspects of the game. Warhammer 40,000, the rules for shooting, for movement, for psychic powers, for assault, it favors shooting. The rules favor shooting. So shooting units by their default, even though you can go in the assault, work much better on there. So what you'll see competitive wargamers do is utilize spam. Copy and paste, take multiples of the best unit. In the sense of the Locust, we're almost forced into utilizing spam if we're going to do it aggressively, because being a light mech and putting it out there aggressively, now that means we're going to take some losses. We're going to take some hits. 1 or 2 hits, you could go down. You know, if I take a PPC hit, an AC5 hit, an AC10 hit, a couple of hits, let's say on average combat efficiency, you could take 3, 4, or 5 hits. Not that lucky headshot or blows off a limb. 3, 4, or 5 hits. So we need to have the redundancy to not only make the weapon systems of the Locust a threat, but also assume for those losses. Now we're going to try to mitigate them, but we're going to spam things out. When I build my list, I will look at the battle value, and that will increase or decrease my primary and secondary units. In this case, the primary units are the Locust. They're going to be the focus of the list. There are secondary units that are going to support the end goals of the Locust being an aggressive mech on there. Think of like a planetary defense force or some, backwater defense league that just has a bunch of light mechs. It's like that narrative where whatever planet Kurita was assaulting or something had just dozens of Hurtzer tanks and just sent them out and just basically demolished everything. So that's kind of this idea. Maybe it was a recon. Maybe that's all we have. But the secondary aspects of the list, they're going to work in support. So around 1,000 battle value, maybe we take 3 Locusts, 2 or 3. As we bump up, we start adding Locusts on there. So certainly at a higher battle value end game, 8,000 BV, I'm not going to take 3 Locusts. There's going to be too much incoming firepower to deal in using my Locusts aggressively to stay up a number of turns. So that's going to grow and grow. I have my lists usually try to be around between 5 to 7 and maybe 10. I can field in total 12 locusts. I've never fielded 12. That doesn't mean that it won't happen one day, but about 10 is what I would like to field on there. So that's pushing it out there. So what we're essentially looking to do is death by 1,000 paper cuts or swarming with lots of stings to run up and just kind of attack. So we're going to deploy in the center of the table. Now, this is of course, times modified by terrain. If I've got some great terrain to get cover and it's not going to slow my movement so much, I'm going to take it. If there's some kill zones or some places I don't want to be, maybe in the center of the table, I'm not going to be there. But the idea is the speed of the Locust is unmatched by most things for that as we move into mediums and heavies. So if I run up the side of the center of the table, even if my opponent stays castled up in the center, there's going to be some elements, there's going to be some vehicles, there's going to be some things on the left side and the right side. I'm going to wolf pack and I'm going to swarm to that left or right side and just basically run in circles and run and gun as best I can. Initiative sinks. Now, I'll have a lot more units than my opponent, but I don't want to blow all my initiative with the Locusts. I want my opponent to get into position, and when I start moving 2 or 3 units in those brackets to make up for it at the end, I want those to be the Locusts. I want to get that rear armor. I want to get, side exploits and try to stay out of the main forward-facing arcs of your weapons as best I can. I don't have the armor. All I can count on is movement for it. I can't even really count on range protecting me because I need to get to short or medium range bands with those weapons to utilize the SRM2s and to utilize the medium laser. What that means is my primary defenses beyond speed is trying my best to stay out of your shooting arc. That's the best I can. So we're going to kind of push in that direction. Infantry. I've said in other podcasts, we've kind of looked at that matrix on my blog. You should be taking infantry no matter what. Maybe some stands of jump infantry, ideally a Karnov or some sort of VTOL transport. If you're a little bit more ground and pound aggressive, although it gets a little pricey with the battle value, goblins. But then you got that debate, like for about the same, it's much more effective. I can take a bulldog. But a lot of different options there. Infantry, yes. The infantry are going to be our initiative sinks. Now, I know a couple of players out there have house ruled it because some will say it's a little beardy to have some infantry and have them burn the initiative sinks. Some people count all the infantry as one sink. Some people will make a house rule for a different phase for the infantry to move. That's going to be up to you and your play style and your play group. We're doing rules as written on there. So that's going to allow my Locusts to get the final movement as best it can, even if you lose the initiative. I want to make this list independent of winning or losing on there. Now, what if? So we're going to keep our opponent busy by swarming with lots and lots of Locusts. It's a finite timer because even if I'm an awesome pilot and I can more or less as best I can stay out of your firing arcs and I get the proper initiatives and I'm doing really well, it's still a light mech. Battletech, you roll 11s and 12s. You're going to hit me. You're going to start knocking me out. I need some support. This is the other aspect of the list. While I'm swarming you and I'm keeping you busy, I need a little bit of DACA. I need a little bit of shooting on there from something else to start putting down a constant barrage of 5 points and 10 points of damage from range on there. I mean, I could have some stuff that can close, but I'm trying to keep the battle value down. Longbows, archers, missile carriers. One possible aspect. Another possibly better aspect would be stuff that can throw out AC-2s, AC-5s, AC-10s on there, partisan tanks, Jaeger mechs, blackjacks. I mean, there's a lot of things that can throw down some autocannon heat. That's literally just keep your opponent busy as the Locusts run around and just pow, 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 pow with the autocannons as it's going down on that aspect. The last piece, and this comes in with infantry in the Karnov, what we'll see is the Locusts will run up, will try to attack the left or the right side, the flank. If my opponent can isolate a unit, if they have something kind of trailing off to the side, a slower unit, I don't know, Locusts pounce? We're going to pounce on that 100%. At the same time, the support units, whatever that's going to be, they're going to be shooting long range, putting down some stuff on there. And then that's going to create like a mix, right? We're going to be mixed. You're going to be shooting at the Locusts. Everybody's running around. That's a great place to hot drop some motivated infantry. That's a great place to have the Karnov go over, bays open, drop them down. If I'm in cover, great. Even if I'm not in cover, the opponent doesn't really have, I mean, you could have a Thunderbolt and the machine guns you to death. Okay, it's only infantry. But if they're so busy dealing with everything else, that's the perfect exploit for infantry to drop point blank range, and with the spread of their weapons, the clusters on there, become a real pain and do some really, really decent amount of damage to there. That's been the plan. That's how I play when I field my multiple Locust units on there. Started out as a lulls list and something different to experiment with Battletech. Been refining it, been having a lot of fun. But that's the checklist for Battletech. You want to do something on the table. What that something is, it's your vision, it's your voice, whatever it's going to be. It's good. Figure out, what does it excel at? Do we need a variant to possibly pull it a little higher? Leverage that. Push it out there. And the weaknesses, can other support units bolster that weakness? In the case of the Locust, just having no armor, really can't. So then how can I keep my opponent busy dealing with other things, or other things taking advantage of their exploit as they deal with the Locusts? We see that in the support unit, and 2 to 4 stands of infantry hot dropping in with Karnovs.